This is Weekly Victory Bells News, reporting to you from around the world. From the League of Nations to end all wars. The paralysis that afflicted the League of Nations in the aftermath of the Abyssinia crisis was broken by a surge of energetic action by the junior diplomats in Geneva under the leadership of Sean Lester. The clear need for a framework to govern national cooperation against the Morganas, despite the current situation, was all that was required to restore some semblance of action to the Palace of Nations. Germany, Italy, and Japan augmented their unofficial delegations as well, recognizing the need for some kind of co-belligerence. The INPF is on its way to becoming a recognized part of the world's war against the Morgana, with all the attendant benefits this may bring, instead of an ad hoc and de facto organization. The ability of the League to forge future and more lasting consensus remains subject to debate, however. The inertia and perhaps the fatalism of leadership in Geneva may be the largest block. In Italy, the East African strategy. Italy benefited from the relative security provided by the French and the British presence in the Mediterranean, enabling the Regia Marina to project its power into the Red Sea. Morgana raids around the Horn of Africa weren't merely disrupted, they were shattered. Enemy access to the Red Sea and the Suez Canal was sharply restricted by the end of the week, earning Italy gratitude from the United Kingdom, whose emphasis on the defense of the British Isles left trade lane protection significantly overstretched. Moreover, the Morgana salvage collected around the Somaliland coast may ultimately be a source of vital revenue and investment for Mogadishu, despite early concerns about potentially toxic effects of the stockpiles, and plans to build modern shipyards and an industrial base in Ethiopia suddenly began to seem almost feasible. For better or worse, Mussolini's grip on East Africa has never seemed stronger. In a week when the wider world seemed in danger of falling apart, the Italian Empire can be said to have improved its global reputation for competence and decisive action. One perhaps unavoidable consequence is that the Italian public is more dismissive of the League of Nations and its various enterprises than they were in August. If the empire has gained prestige, the people who tried to hold the empire back have been discredited, at least for now. From the United States, the Battle of Belle Harbor. The United States held its own in the first week of the conflict, scoring perhaps the first organized, decisive victory against the new arrivals. The Morgana sneak attack on New York, popularly known in some quarters as the Battle of Belle Harbor, after a period of sustained bombardment of a suburban neighborhood in Queens, was thoroughly repulsed in what may have been the initial manifestation of the famous USS Recruit. Bells are now all the rage in the United States, instant symbols of both glamour and heroic service, and a great deal of that public admiration has been fostered by Hollywood, which is already preparing dozens of new productions based on the careers, fictional or otherwise, of the Bells. That said, the American public was not prepared to be attacked by unknown enemies, either materially or psychologically. National moves to fortify the eastern coastline were enthusiastically embraced by the American people, but there's still a hint of fear in the air. Might worse be coming. Given that, it's perhaps unsurprising that American attitudes toward the Royal Navy have been shaken. Raids along the eastern seaboard herald the end of guarantee of free trade on the high seas. Naval planners know that the Panama Canal and control over the Caribbean will be the decisive element in preserving the safety of American coasts and prosperity. From Japan, recall naval forces. Though the IJN's choice to prioritize the defense of the home islands was controversial in some circles, particularly among army leadership, which felt that their forces and supply lines in Korea, Manchuria, and China were far more exposed and more in need of support from the start, the decision proved extremely popular with the Japanese public, and profoundly beneficial to Japanese ports. Every indication is that they plan to build upon their successes, turning the finest minds in Japanese naval and industrial circles toward building preparedness against this deadly new foe. The Navy and its political supporters now have capital in Japanese politics that they did not enjoy over the summer, and if these trends continue, the effects could be profound. Reports suggest that certain Soviet Pacific assets have been forced to appeal to the IJN for protection, despite decades of mistrust and hostility. The trade-off, according to voices linked to the Imperial Army, is that Morgana rampages around the Korean peninsula and the Chinese coasts have endangered the stability of Japan's overseas projects, and indeed, unrest seems to be markedly rising. That, however, is not a point that casts the army in a particularly favorable light either. A looming threat to all of Japan's interests is the problem of oil. Although the stockpile is sufficient for 9 to 12 months, the prioritization of the defense of the home islands will degrade the security of the long routes by which oil must travel if it is to reach Japan. From Germany, anti-Nixa pivot. The war with the Morganas began at almost the same moment as Germany's invasion of Poland, and the business of conquest was slowed, though certainly not stopped. The Kriegsmarine seemed to prioritize engaging the new Morgana threat above supporting the Heer in its move eastward, and there's some evidence to suggest that this decision was not supported, nor particularly appreciated by Germany's political leadership. It can't be denied that the Kriegsmarine largely successfully protected Germany's great ports, whose fortifications are now underway, and perhaps ironically, given the benefits to Polish ships seeking refuge with Britain, did more than anyone else to maintain a degree of safety for marine traffic traveling between the North Sea and the Baltic. Moreover, the ferocious combat in the Baltic gave German naval forces a core of early experience that many of the world's other navies would struggle to match. In comparison, German land forces ran into difficult problems both with the tenaciousness of the Polish resistance and also the appearance of sinister Morgana riverine craft. It's possible that the Kriegsmarine has managed to exacerbate inter-service rivalries and to alienate their paymasters, even as they distinguish themselves at sea. From France, East Atlantic strategy. Where Italy's defense of its overseas holdings seemed to have been a gamble well rewarded by the turn of events, France's feverish battles for its European heartland yielded more complicated results. Her Atlantic ports were spared the worst of the Morgana's depredations through the truly heroic efforts of her defenders, but the picture in the Mediterranean was more complicated. There, French defenders seemed to be luring Morganas away from Italian waters as much as anything else, and French interests in the colonies, perhaps particularly the French Antilles, were badly served. International trade, particularly along transatlantic routes, slowed to a trickle. The unexpected threat seems to have permanently suspended any attempts at the rescue of Poland as well. Perhaps more dangerous still, on the peripheries now, there's a fear and a discontent that wasn't there before. Are they to be left defenseless while the nation's defenders patrol outside Bordeaux? For all that, there were positive signs. France has been inspired to turn its energies towards preparedness. Systemic work has begun on improving the nation's coastal defenses, and French industry has begun the urgent discussion of how the Marine Nationale might best be served. The cohesion of the Francophone world may have been bruised, but the war is not yet lost. From the United Kingdom, Home Defence. Early decisions by the Admiralty to prioritize the defense of the British Isles above all else led to difficulties and inefficiencies in trade lane protection, the primary purpose of many trades on station outside home waters. As with France, international trade plummeted, but for the British, that meant blockades on both the vital supply links east and west and the looming specters of famine and industrial collapse. The defense of home waters was magnificent, however. The North Sea held against impossible odds, albeit with some help from Germany of all nations, and Britain's great ports and industrial centers remained largely undamaged, even when poison mist made them unsafe temporarily. The decision by the Kriegsmarine to focus first on the Morganas had benefited British security, but the two nations are still at war, and direct cooperation is impossible. Of course, the performance of HMS Bulldog, as well as her inspiring speech, will doubtless be remembered in Britain for generations. The British people seem resolved to face the challenge ahead of them. Some even argue that this is, in fact, an opportunity for the Royal Navy and the British Empire to seize their destiny and to prove that they will never be surpassed nor fall into twilight. There is no doubt that the savagery of Morgana raids on Calcutta, Bombay, and Cape Town will long be remembered. There are many who wonder where the Royal Navy was as hundreds were taken. There are even some who say this single week has done more damage to the idea of the whole empire than any series of events since the independence of Ireland. From the Soviet Union, the Baltic Sea Strategy. From all accounts, the week was a struggle for supremacy on the seas. With assistance, perhaps accidentally, from Germany, the Morgana threat in the Baltic Sea was kept some distance from Leningrad, and in hurrying ships into battle before their intended commission, the Baltic fleet may have sparked the awakening of bells they would not have otherwise seen. Small Morgana groups seem to have operated in the Black Sea with minimal challenge to their plans, and appear to be growing in strength. Sevastopol and Odessa each sustained several raids despite heroic defense for both military and civilian populations, and early reports from the Pacific suggest frankly nightmarish conditions around Vladivostok and the Soviet Far East, with some signs that local Soviet forces have even been forced to call upon the Imperial Japanese Navy for assistance. Given a lack of coordination and a series of shared defeats, relations with Turkey are strained. Fighting is only getting fiercer in the Black Sea and the Pacific. The naval trade lanes to Germany are as secure as they can be in present crisis, however, and the Morganas have not seriously threatened the strength nor the stability of the Soviet Union. This has been WVBN, reporting from around the world.